I signed what I thought was my living will. Instead, I just signed away custody of my children. My own sister had tricked me into giving her everything that mattered most. My name is Lisa Travis, and I need to tell you about the day my world collapsed. It started with what seemed like an act of love from my sister Marie Reed. She'd always been the responsible one, the one who thought ahead, planned for every possibility. When she suggested I get my legal affairs in order after my husband's sudden death, it made perfect sense. "Lisa, you need to think about the kids," Marie said, sitting across from my kitchen table with a stack of papers. "What happens if something happens to you? They need security." I was still grieving, barely keeping my head above water as a single mother to my two beautiful children, ages 8 and 10. The thought of them being left alone terrified me more than anything. Marie knew exactly what buttons to push. "I've already talked to Lynn Schroeder, that lawyer friend of mine," she continued, sliding the documents toward me. "She's prepared everything. A living will, guardianship papers, the whole package. All you have to do is sign." The papers looked official, full of legal language I didn't understand. My eyes were still swollen from crying, my mind foggy with grief. I trusted Marie completely. She was my big sister, the one who'd always protected me growing up. Why would I question her now? "Where do I sign?" I asked. Marie's fingers moved quickly across the pages, pointing to highlighted signature lines. "Here, here, and here. Initial this page. Sign there." I signed without reading. I signed because I trusted her. I signed because I was exhausted and overwhelmed and desperate for someone else to handle the details of life that felt too heavy for me to carry. That was 6 months ago. Today, I discovered what those papers really said. It started when I tried to enroll my daughter in a new school. The enrollment officer looked at my custody documents and frowned. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Travis, but according to our records, you don't have legal custody of these children. The guardian listed here is Marie Reed." My blood turned to ice. "That's impossible. I'm their mother." The woman showed me the paperwork. There it was, in black and white, my signature, on documents that transferred full legal custody of my children to my sister. Not temporary guardianship in case of emergency. Full custody. Permanent custody. I drove home in a daze, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. How was this possible? I'd signed a living will, hadn't I? Medical directives? Not custody papers. Never custody papers. I tore through my filing cabinet until I found my copies of the documents Marie had given me. As I read them carefully for the first time, the truth hit me like a physical blow. These weren't living wills at all. They were custody transfer agreements, voluntary termination of parental rights, documents stating that I was an unfit mother who willingly surrendered my children to my sister's care. The papers painted me as mentally unstable, financially irresponsible, unable to care for my children properly. Marie had crafted a narrative of a grieving widow who'd fallen apart after her husband's death. And I'd signed every word of it. My phone rang. It was Marie. "Lisa, honey, we need to talk," she said, her voice sickeningly sweet. "I know you found out about the papers." "You lied to me," I whispered. "You stole my children." "I saved them," she shot back, her mask finally slipping. "You were a mess after David died, crying all the time, barely functioning. Those kids needed stability. They needed their mother. They needed someone who could take care of them properly. Someone with a steady job, a stable home, a clear head." The pieces started falling into place. Marie had been planning this for months, maybe even before David died. She'd always wanted children, but couldn't have them. She'd watched me with my kids, made comments about how lucky I was, how she'd do things differently. "You can't do this," I said. "They're my children. I'll fight you." Marie's laugh was cold. "With what lawyer, Lisa? What money? You can barely afford groceries. And those papers you signed? They're ironclad. Lynn made sure of that." Lynn Schroeder, the lawyer who was supposedly helping me. I realized now she'd been working for Marie all along, crafting documents designed to steal my children while making it look legitimate. But Marie had made one mistake. She'd underestimated a mother's love. I spent the next week gathering evidence. I recorded phone conversations where Marie admitted to tricking me. I found emails between her and Lynn discussing their plan. I documented every moment of the deception, every lie they'd told. What would you have done when someone you trust completely betrays you in the most devastating way possible? I took everything to a real lawyer, one who specialized in family law and had a reputation for fighting corrupt custody cases. When she saw the evidence, her eyes blazed with anger. "This is fraud," she said. "Criminal fraud. Your sister and her lawyer friend are going to prison." The legal battle was swift and brutal. Marie had been so confident in her deception that she'd left a paper trail everywhere. The recorded conversations were damning. The emails were even worse. They'd discussed my mental state and how to handle Lisa, like I was a problem to be solved, not a grieving mother who needed support. When we confronted Lynn Schroeder with the evidence, she crumbled immediately. She admitted everything, trying to save her law license by throwing Marie under the bus. She'd falsified documents, misrepresented legal proceedings, and committed multiple felonies in service of Marie's twisted plan. The day I got my children back was the most beautiful day of my life. They ran into my arms, crying, telling me how much they'd missed me, how confused they'd been when Marie told them they had to live with her now, because Mommy couldn't take care of them anymore. Marie was arrested that same afternoon. The look on her face when the handcuffs clicked shut was something I'll never forget. For the first time in her life, she couldn't manipulate her way out of consequences. At her sentencing, I stood before the judge and spoke about what she'd done. Not just to me, but to my children. How she'd traumatized them by ripping them away from their mother during the most difficult time of their young lives. How she'd used their grief and confusion to serve her own selfish desires. "Your Honor," I said, "my sister didn't just steal custody papers. She stole 6 months of my children's childhood. 6 months of bedtime stories, homework help, and healing together as a family. 6 months we can never get back." Marie got 5 years in prison. Lynn Schroeder lost her law license and got 3 years. But more than the legal victory, I got something precious back. My children and the knowledge that a mother's love really can overcome anything. Today, my kids and I are stronger than ever. We've been through hell together, and we've come out the other side. They know now that no matter what happens, no matter who tries to separate us, I will always fight for them. Always. Sometimes the people who hurt us most are the ones we trust completely. But sometimes love really does win in the end. The victory felt hollow as I sat in my empty house that night, my children finally asleep in their own beds. Yes, I had them back. Yes, Marie was behind bars, but something gnawed at me, a feeling I couldn't shake. How had she known exactly what documents to forge? How had she anticipated every legal loophole? Marie was manipulative, but she wasn't a lawyer. She couldn't have orchestrated something this complex alone. I pulled out the box of evidence my attorney had returned to me after the trial. Court documents, recorded conversations, email printouts. I'd been through it all before, but tonight I spread everything across my kitchen table with fresh eyes. That's when I noticed something I'd missed during the chaos of fighting for my children. the timestamps on Marie's emails to Lynn Schroeder. They didn't start after David's funeral like I'd assumed. The earliest ones were dated 6 months before David died. 6 months before the accident that changed everything. My hands trembled as I read the first email again. Marie wasn't discussing taking my children because I was grieving. She was discussing taking them while David was still alive, while our family was still intact and happy. Lisa's always been too soft with those kids, Marie had written. They need structure, discipline, real guidance. When the time is right, we'll need to act quickly. When the time is right, not if something happens. When? I scrolled through more emails, my heart pounding harder with each one. Marie and Lynn had been planning this custody grab for months before David's death. They'd researched the legal process, identified weaknesses in family court procedures, even discussed the best timing for their scheme. But that meant they'd been counting on something happening to David. Or maybe they'd known something would happen. I grabbed my laptop and pulled up the police report from David's accident. I'd never read it carefully before. It had been too painful. The investigating officer had ruled it an accident. Icy roads, poor visibility, a curve taken too fast. David's car had slid off the mountain highway and rolled down an embankment. But now I noticed details that had seemed unimportant at the time. David had been driving home from a meeting that Tuesday night, a meeting Marie had insisted he attend. She'd called him that afternoon, told him there was a family emergency he needed to discuss in person. When I'd asked her about it later, she'd claimed she'd been confused by grief, that there had been no emergency. I'd believed her. Why wouldn't I? She was my sister. My phone buzzed with a text message, unknown number. Stop digging, Lisa. Some truths are better buried. My blood turned to ice. Who was this? How did they know what I was doing? Another message appeared. You have your children back. Be grateful for what you have. I screenshot both messages with shaking fingers, then immediately called Detective Rodriguez, the officer who'd handled Marie's arrest. He'd given me his card and told me to contact him if anything else came up. Mrs. Travis? It's late. Is everything all right? Detective, I think Marie's custody scheme was just the beginning. I think she might have had something to do with my husband's death. Silence on the other end. Then, that's a serious accusation. What makes you think that? I told him about the emails, the timeline, the mysterious text messages. He listened without interrupting, and I could hear him taking notes. I'll need to see everything, he said finally. Can you come to the station tomorrow morning? And Mrs. Travis? Don't mention this to anyone else. If you're right about this, you could be in danger. That night, I barely slept. Every creak of the house made me jump. Every shadow seemed to move. I checked on my children 3 times, making sure they were safe in their beds. The next morning, I dropped the kids at school and drove straight to the police station. Detective Rodriguez was waiting with a forensics expert and another detective I didn't recognize. This is Detective Chen, Rodriguez explained. She specializes in cold cases and insurance fraud. We've been looking into some irregularities surrounding your husband's life insurance policy. My stomach dropped. What kind of irregularities? Your sister was listed as a secondary beneficiary, Detective Chen said carefully. That's not unusual. But what is unusual is that the beneficiary designation was changed just 2 weeks before your husband's death. And the change was initiated by someone using your husband's personal information, but the signature doesn't match his handwriting. The room started spinning. Marie hadn't just planned to steal my children. She'd planned to steal everything. There's more, Rodriguez continued. We pulled your husband's phone records from that night. He received a call from your sister 20 minutes before the accident. The call lasted 8 minutes. She told you there was no emergency, but the call duration suggests they had a substantial conversation. What could she have said to him? I whispered. We're working on that, but we think she might have given him information designed to upset him, distract him while he was driving on a dangerous road in bad weather. Detective Chen leaned forward. Mrs. Travis, we need you to think carefully. In the weeks before your husband's death, did your sister ask any unusual questions about his routine? His schedule? His insurance policies? The memories came flooding back. Marie asking about David's late meetings, commenting on how dangerous that mountain road was in winter, suggesting he should update his will, just in case. I'd thought she was being caring, protective. Instead, she'd been gathering intelligence. She knew his route home, I said slowly. She knew he always took Highway 9 because it was faster. She knew he had that meeting every month on the second Tuesday. And she knew the weather forecast called for freezing rain that night. Chen added grimly. The pieces were falling into place, painting a picture so horrific I could barely process it. Marie hadn't just taken advantage of my grief, she'd orchestrated the cause of it. She'd murdered my husband and then swooped in to comfort me, all while planning to steal my children and his life insurance money. We're going to need you to help us prove this, Rodriguez said. Marie's in prison, but she still has access to phones, visitors. We need you to get her talking, get her to admit what she did. You want me to visit her? After what she's done? I know it's asking a lot, but you're the only one she might confess to. She thinks she's won part of the game. She had your children for months. She caused you tremendous pain. People like Marie, they like to gloat about their victories. I thought about David, about the life we'd planned together, about my children who would grow up without their father because of Marie's greed and jealousy, about all the nights I'd cried myself to sleep, blaming myself for not being strong enough after his death, never knowing that his death hadn't been an accident at all. What do I need to do? Detective Chen handed me a small device. Recording equipment. Completely legal since you're working with law enforcement. Visit her. Tell her you know about the insurance money. See if you can get her to talk about that night. Will it be dangerous? She's behind bars. But Mrs. Travis, if we're right about this, your sister is more dangerous than we initially thought. She's not just a manipulator. She's a killer who's been planning this for years. I took the recording device with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. 2 days later, I walked into the county jail for the first time in my life. The guards led me through multiple security checkpoints to a small room with plastic chairs and a metal table. Then they brought Marie in. She looked different in her orange jumpsuit. Smaller somehow, less polished. But her eyes were the same, calculating, cold, watching for any advantage. Lisa, she said, sitting across from me. I wondered when you'd come. I know about the insurance money, I said quietly. For just a moment, her mask slipped. A flash of surprise, maybe fear. Then the smile returned. I don't know what you mean. The beneficiary change. 2 weeks before David died, you forged his signature. Marie leaned back in her chair, studying my face. You can't prove that. Actually, we can. The police have handwriting experts. They know it wasn't David's signature. She was quiet for a long moment, her fingers drumming on the metal table. When she spoke again, her voice was different, colder. You always were too trusting, Lisa. Even now, you have no idea how deep this goes. My heart pounded, but I kept my expression neutral. What do you mean? Marie's smile turned cruel. You think I acted alone? You think Lynn and I just stumbled into this brilliant plan? Who else was involved? She laughed, a sound that made my skin crawl. Someone who's been watching you for years. Someone who knows every detail of your life, your routines, your weaknesses. Tell me who? Why would I do that? You've already taken everything from me. My freedom, my reputation, my future. You took my husband, I whispered. You took my children. You destroyed my family. I improved your family, she snapped. David was weak, always coddling you, making excuses for your failures. And those kids needed real discipline, real structure. I was doing you all a favor. By murdering him? The words hung in the air between us. Marie's eyes went wide, then narrowed to slits. You're recording this conversation, aren't you? She said softly. My blood turned to ice. How had she known? That's okay, she continued, her voice eerily calm. Let them hear this. David's death was just the beginning. The real mastermind is still out there, still watching you, still planning, and you'll never see them coming. She stood up abruptly, signaling to the guards that the visit was over. Sleep well, sister, she called over her shoulder as they led her away. But keep one eye open. You have no idea who you can trust. I sat frozen in that plastic chair, my mind reeling. Marie had just confessed to being involved in David's murder, but she'd also revealed something far more terrifying. There was someone else. Someone still free, still planning, still watching my family. As I walked back to my car, I felt eyes on me. I turned around, scanning the parking lot, the street, the windows of nearby buildings. Nothing seemed out of place, but the feeling persisted. That night, I played the recording for Detectives Rodriguez and Chen. They were thrilled with Marie's partial confession, but they shared my concern about her claims of a mastermind. We'll increase patrols around your house, Rodriguez promised, and we'll start investigating anyone who had regular contact with both you and Marie. How many people could that be? I asked. You'd be surprised, Chen said grimly. Family friends, neighbors, co-workers, service providers. Someone who knew your routines well enough to help plan this. I went home that night with a new security system and a growing sense of dread. As I tucked my children into bed, I wondered who among the people I trusted might be watching us, waiting for the next opportunity to strike. The next morning, I found a note tucked under my windshield wiper. Marie was right. You should have stopped digging. Now we have to accelerate our timeline. I called Detective Rodriguez immediately, but as I stood there in my driveway, holding that threatening note, I realized the horrible truth. Someone had been in my driveway during the night. Someone had been close enough to my house to leave this message while my children and I slept just yards away. The mastermind Marie had mentioned wasn't some distant threat. They were here, in my neighborhood, watching my family. And now that I'd exposed Marie, I'd become their next target. I looked up at my house, where my children were getting ready for school, completely unaware that we were all in terrible danger. That's when I saw the curtain move in my neighbor's window. Just a slight shift, but enough to make my heart stop. Someone was watching us right now. I grabbed my children and rushed them inside, my heart pounding as I locked every door and window. The curtain in my neighbor's house had gone still, but I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was still watching us. Mom, what's wrong? My daughter Emma asked, noticing my shaking hands as I checked the locks for the third time. Nothing, sweetheart. Just being extra careful. But it wasn't nothing. Someone had been close enough to my house to leave that note. Someone who knew I'd been to see Marie. Someone who was watching our every move. I called Detective Rodriguez from the kitchen, keeping my voice low so the children wouldn't hear. We found the note, I whispered into the phone. Someone was in my driveway last night. We're sending a patrol car over right now, Rodriguez said. Don't leave the house until we get there. While we waited, I found myself studying every neighbor's window, every parked car on the street. The mailman walking his route looked suspicious. The jogger who passed by twice seemed to slow down near my house. Even Mrs. Patterson from across the street, watering her garden, appeared to be watching us a little too closely. When Detective Rodriguez arrived 20 minutes later, I felt like I was losing my mind. The note was printed on standard copy paper, she said after examining it. No fingerprints, no DNA. Whoever left this knew what they were doing. What about the neighbor's window? I saw the curtain move. Rodriguez nodded. We'll check with all your neighbors. Someone might have seen something. That afternoon, while the children were at school, Detective Chen called with disturbing news. We've been going through Marie's phone records from before her arrest, he said. She made dozens of calls to a number we can't trace. Burner phone, probably. So there really is someone else involved. It looks that way. And Lisa, there's something else. We found evidence that someone's been monitoring your credit reports, your bank accounts, even your children's school records. This person has been tracking your family for months. My legs went weak. I sank into a kitchen chair, trying to process what he was telling me. How is that possible? Identity theft, mostly, but also someone with legitimate access to your information. A banker, an accountant, maybe someone at your insurance company. I thought about all the people who'd had access to my personal information over the years. Financial advisors, tax preparers, mortgage brokers, doctors' offices. The list was endless. We need you to make a list, Chen continued. Anyone who's handled your paperwork, anyone who knew about your family's routines and finances. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table with a yellow legal pad, trying to remember every professional who'd ever seen my personal information. The list grew longer and longer. Bank managers, loan officers, real estate agents, pediatricians, school administrators. Then I remembered something that made my blood run cold. 3 months before David died, we'd updated our wills and life insurance policies. We'd worked with a family attorney who specialized in estate planning, someone who would have seen every detail of our financial situation, our family structure, our plans for the children's future. Someone who would have known exactly what Marie needed to forge and steal. I grabbed my phone and called Detective Rodriguez. I think I know who might be involved, I said, my voice shaking. Our estate planning attorney, Lynn Schroeder. She handled all our legal documents right before David died. There was silence on the other end of the line. Rodriguez, are you there? Lisa, we need to talk. Can you come to the station tomorrow morning? Why? What's wrong? Just come in. And Lisa, don't mention this conversation to anyone. Not your neighbors, not your friends. Nobody. That night, I barely slept. Every sound outside made me jump. Every creak in the house sent my heart racing. I kept thinking about Lynn Schroeder, the polished attorney who'd seemed so professional, so trustworthy when she'd helped us plan our estate. She'd had access to everything. Our bank accounts, our insurance policies, our wills. She'd known exactly how much money was at stake, and exactly what documents would need to be altered to steal it. The next morning, I dropped the children at school and drove to the police station. Detective Rodriguez was waiting for me with a thick folder on her desk. Sit down, Lisa, she said, her expression grave. We ran a background check on Lynn Schroeder last night. She opened the folder and pulled out several documents. Lynn Schroeder doesn't exist, she said quietly. The woman who handled your estate planning isn't a licensed attorney in this state. Her bar certification is fake. Her office address is a mail drop. Even her law degree is fraudulent. I felt like the room was spinning. That's impossible. She had an office, a secretary, legal documents. All fake. We went to the address this morning. The building manager says someone rented that office space for 6 months, paid cash up front, then disappeared right after your husband died. But she knew legal terminology. She prepared real documents. Anyone can learn legal language from the internet, and the documents she prepared for you weren't legally binding anyway. She was never planning to file them properly. Rodriguez pulled out another sheet of paper. The real Lynn Schroeder is a retired attorney living in Florida. Someone stole her identity to create this fake practice. My hands were shaking as the full scope of the deception became clear. Marie hadn't just convinced me to sign over custody of my children. She'd worked with someone who'd created an entire fake law practice just to steal from my family. How long were they planning this? I whispered. Based on when the fake office was rented and when your insurance beneficiaries were changed, at least 8 months. Probably longer. 8 months before David died. Yes. This wasn't a crime of opportunity, Lisa. This was a carefully orchestrated plan to murder your husband and steal everything your family owned. I thought about all those meetings with the fake Lynn Schroeder, how professional she'd seemed, how she'd explained complex legal concepts, how she'd made me feel like I was protecting my family's future. She was studying us, I realized, learning our routines, our weaknesses, our financial situation. And reporting everything back to Marie, Rodriguez confirmed. We found encrypted emails on Marie's laptop. They were coordinating every detail. Where is she now? The fake Lynn Schroeder? Rodriguez's expression darkened. That's what we're trying to figure out. She disappeared completely after your husband's funeral. No trace of her anywhere. But she left the note on my car yesterday? We think so, which means she's still in the area, still watching your family. A chill ran down my spine. This woman, whoever she really was, had spent months studying my family. She knew our routines, our vulnerabilities, our fears. She'd been close enough to leave a threatening note on my car while my children slept inside the house. What do we do now? I asked. We keep looking for her, and we keep you and your children safe. As I left the police station, I couldn't stop thinking about all those meetings with the fake attorney. How she'd smiled when she explained the custody documents. How she'd assured me I was doing the right thing for my children's future. She'd been planning to steal my children from the very beginning. That afternoon, I picked up Emma and Jake from school and took them to my mother's house across town. I needed them somewhere safe while the police continued their investigation. Are we staying here tonight? Emma asked as we walked up to Grandma's front door. Just for a few days, I said, trying to keep my voice calm. While Mommy takes care of some grown-up things. But as I rang the doorbell, I noticed something that made my blood freeze. There was a car parked across the street that I'd seen before. A silver sedan with tinted windows. I'd noticed it in my neighborhood yesterday, and now here it was again, parked where it had a perfect view of my mother's house. Someone was following us. Someone was tracking our every movement, just like they had been for months. I rushed the children inside and immediately called Detective Rodriguez. She's here, I whispered into the phone. The woman who was pretending to be Lynn Schroeder. She followed us to my mother's house. Stay inside. We're sending units now. I watched through the window as 2 police cars arrived within minutes. The officers approached the silver sedan, but as they got close, the car pulled away from the curb and disappeared around the corner. Detective Rodriguez called me back 20 minutes later. The car was stolen, she said. Reported missing this morning from a parking garage downtown. So she's getting more desperate. And more dangerous. Lisa, We think she's planning something. The fact that she's taking these risks, following you in broad daylight, means she's running out of time. That night, as I tucked my children into bed at my mother's house, I tried to act normal. But my mind was racing, trying to piece together everything I'd learned. Marie and the fake Lynn Schroeder had been planning this for almost a year. They'd studied my family, learned our routines, identified our vulnerabilities. They'd created fake documents, stolen identities, and ultimately murdered my husband. But what was their endgame now? Marie was in jail, facing murder charges. Why was her partner still taking such enormous risks to watch my family? I got my answer the next morning when I found another note. This one slipped under my mother's front door while we slept. "You've cost us everything. Now you'll pay the price. The children come with me, or they'll end up like their father." My hands shook as I read those words. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was about revenge, and my children were the target. I called Detective Rodriguez immediately, but as I stood there in my mother's kitchen, staring at that threatening note, I realized something that made my heart stop. The handwriting looked familiar. I'd seen it before, months ago, on legal documents and contracts. But it wasn't the fake Lynn Schroeder's handwriting. It was someone else entirely. Someone I'd trusted completely. Someone who was supposed to be protecting my family, not destroying it. I grabbed the folder of documents from my purse and compared the handwriting on the note to the signatures on my insurance papers. They matched perfectly. The person who'd been helping Marie and the fake attorney wasn't a stranger at all. It was someone who'd had access to my house, my children, and my trust for years. Someone who knew exactly where to find us, no matter where we tried to hide. I reached for my phone to call the police, but before I could dial, I heard the sound that made my blood turn to ice. My mother's front door was opening. Someone was coming inside, and they had a key. I heard footsteps in the hallway. Slow, deliberate steps that knew exactly where they were going. My mother's voice called out from the living room. "Lisa, is that you, honey?" But I was standing right here in the kitchen, which meant someone else was in the house. I grabbed my children and pulled them behind me as the footsteps grew closer. My heart hammered against my chest as I prepared to see the fake Lynn Schroeder, or Marie's accomplice, or some stranger who'd broken in to carry out their threats. Instead, I saw my mother's business partner walking into the kitchen like she owned the place. Patricia Williams, the woman who'd been my mother's closest friend for over 20 years. The woman who'd helped raise me after my father died. The woman who'd been like a second mother to Emma and Jake. "Patricia?" I whispered, confusion flooding through me. "What are you doing here? How did you get in?" She held up a key ring, her expression cold in a way I'd never seen before. "Your mother gave me a spare years ago, for emergencies." "This isn't an emergency. You scared us half to death." Patricia's laugh sent chills down my spine. "Oh, sweetheart, this absolutely is an emergency. You've ruined everything." That's when I noticed the handwriting comparison still clutched in my hand. The threatening note, the insurance documents, all signed by Patricia Williams. "It was you," I breathed. "You wrote the note. You've been working with Marie this whole time?" "Working with Marie?" Patricia's eyes flashed with anger. "That stupid woman couldn't plan a grocery trip without help. I've been planning this for 3 years, Lisa, long before Marie ever came into the picture." My legs felt weak. I sank into a kitchen chair, pulling my children closer. 3 years? But why?" "Because your family has everything," Patricia spat. "Your husband's life insurance, the house, the children's trust funds, money that should have been shared with the people who actually cared about you. You cared about us. You are family. Family? Patricia laughed bitterly. I've watched your mother struggle to pay her bills while you lived in that beautiful house with your perfect husband and your perfect children. I've listened to her worry about retirement while you never had to worry about anything. I thought about all those times Patricia had offered to help with the children. All those afternoons she'd picked them up from school. All those evenings she'd stayed for dinner, listening to our family conversations, learning our routines. You were studying us, I realized. Just like the fake lawyer. The fake lawyer was my idea, Patricia said proudly. I found Marie online, looking for ways to get custody of children from unfit parents. She thought she was so smart, but she was just following my plan. Unfit parents? My voice cracked. We loved our children. We took care of them. You were selfish, Patricia snapped. Keeping all that money to yourselves while your mother worried about her future. While I worked 60 hours a week just to keep our business afloat. The pieces were falling into place, each revelation more horrifying than the last. The custody papers, you helped create those. I wrote them myself, used my legal secretary training from 40 years ago. Marie just needed someone to play the lawyer role. And my husband's accident? Patricia's expression darkened. That wasn't supposed to happen. Marie got impatient. She thought if David was gone, you'd be more vulnerable, more likely to sign whatever we put in front of you. She murdered my husband because you told her to. I told her to be patient. But she panicked when David started asking questions about the life insurance changes. He was getting suspicious. I felt sick. My husband had died because he'd been trying to protect our family, and the woman I'd trusted like family had orchestrated the whole thing. Where's my mother? I asked, suddenly terrified. Shopping, like she does every Thursday morning. She has no idea what's happening. She's going to be devastated when she finds out what you've done. Patricia's face softened for just a moment. She doesn't have to know. Not if you cooperate. Cooperate with what? You're going to sign new custody papers. Real ones this time. Giving me guardianship of Emma and Jake. Never. Then they'll have another tragic accident, just like their father. My children pressed closer to me, and I could feel them trembling. Emma was old enough to understand some of what was happening, and the fear in her eyes broke my heart. You're insane, I whispered. I'm practical, Patricia corrected. With guardianship, I control their trust funds. With their trust funds, your mother and I can finally have the retirement we deserve. The police know about Marie. They know about the fake lawyer. They'll figure out your connection. Patricia smiled coldly. Marie doesn't know my real name. The fake lawyer never met me in person, and you're going to disappear before you can tell anyone what you've discovered. People will look for us. You're a grieving widow who couldn't handle the pressure. You took your children and ran away to start fresh somewhere new. It happens all the time. I thought about Detective Rodriguez, about the stolen car that had been following us, about the threatening notes. Patricia had been orchestrating everything, staying in the shadows while Marie and the fake lawyer took all the risks. How long have you been planning this? I asked, trying to keep her talking while I figured out how to protect my children. Since the day David's company gave him that big promotion. Suddenly, you had money for private schools and family vacations while your mother was clipping coupons. It wasn't fair. So, you decided to steal our children? I decided to give them a better life, with people who truly understand the value of money. I looked at Patricia Williams, this woman who'd been at every birthday party, every Christmas morning, every important moment in my children's lives. She'd held Emma when she was born. She'd taught Jake to ride his bicycle. She'd been the grandmother figure they'd never had. And she'd been planning to steal them from me for 3 years. The police are already looking for the real Lynn Schroeder, I said. When they don't find her, they'll start looking deeper. By then, you'll be long gone, and I'll be the grieving family friend, helping your mother cope with the loss of her daughter and grandchildren. Patricia reached into her purse and pulled out a manila folder. The custody papers are already prepared. All you have to do is sign. I won't. Then I'll have to make the same call I made about David's car brakes. The casual way she mentioned murdering my husband made my blood run cold. This wasn't the woman I'd known my entire life. This was a stranger wearing Patricia's face, speaking with Patricia's voice. But something still didn't make sense. If you've been planning this for 3 years, why wait until now? Why not just take the children after David died? Patricia's smile faltered slightly. Because someone else got involved. Someone who wasn't part of the original plan. Who? Someone who's been watching your family even longer than I have. Someone who has their own reasons for wanting those children. My heart stopped. There was someone else. Someone Patricia was afraid of. Who is it? I demanded. But before Patricia could answer, we heard the sound of my mother's car pulling into the driveway. Patricia's eyes went wide with panic. She's not supposed to be back yet. That's when I realized the most terrifying truth of all. Patricia had been so focused on her own plan that she'd missed the bigger picture. She thought she was the mastermind, but she was just another pawn in someone else's game. Someone who'd been using her, just like she'd been using Marie and the fake lawyer. Someone who was about to walk through that front door. The sound of my mother's key in the front door sent ice through my veins. Patricia's panic was real. Her face had gone completely white. "Mom, don't come in!" I shouted, but it was too late. The door was already opening. "Lisa, I forgot my shopping list and—" My mother's voice died as she saw us all huddled together in the living room. Her eyes went from Patricia to me to my terrified children. "What's going on?" she asked quietly. Patricia stood up slowly, her hands shaking. "Dorothy, you weren't supposed to be back yet." "I forgot my list," my mother repeated, but her voice had changed. Gone was the confused elderly woman I'd been worried about. Her posture straightened, her eyes sharpened, and suddenly she looked 20 years younger. "Patricia, we talked about this. You were supposed to wait until I gave you the signal." My world tilted sideways. "Mom?" She looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Cold, calculating. "I'm sorry you had to find out this way, sweetheart." But Patricia was never very good at following instructions. "I don't understand." But even as I said it, the pieces were clicking into place with horrible clarity. "Your mother has been planning this longer than I have," Patricia said, and I could hear the fear in her voice. "I thought I was in charge, but she's been pulling the strings from the beginning." My mother walked over to her purse and pulled out a thick folder. Not the scattered papers of an elderly woman, but organized documents in perfect order. 43 years, she said calmly. 43 years I watched your father build his business while I did the real work. 43 years of being the little woman behind the big man. And when he died, what did I get? A small pension and the promise that you'd take care of me. "I have taken care of you," I whispered. "You gave me an allowance, like I was a child." Her voice was bitter. "Do you know what it's like to ask your own daughter for permission to buy a new dress? To have to justify every expense? You said you wanted me to handle the finances. You said it was too stressful." I said what I needed to say to gain your trust. Just like Patricia said what she needed to say to gain mine. I looked at Patricia, who was backing away from my mother like she was facing a dangerous animal. You used her, I said, understanding flooding through me. I needed someone to do the actual work. Someone who could befriend Marie, someone who could find the right lawyer to forge documents. Patricia was perfect. She already resented your success, and she was desperate for money. The business is failing, Patricia said quickly. Dorothy promised me a way out if I helped her. And you believed her? I asked. My mother laughed, but there was no warmth in it. Patricia, dear, did you really think I was going to split the children's trust funds with you? You were a tool. A very useful tool, but still, just a tool. You said we were partners, Patricia whispered. I said what you needed to hear, just like I told Marie what she needed to hear. Just like I told the man pretending to be Lynn Schroeder what he needed to hear. My children pressed closer to me, and I wrapped my arms around them protectively. You're not taking them. Oh, but I am. You see, I've thought this through much more carefully than Patricia did. I'm not just planning to take custody. I'm planning to disappear entirely. She opened her folder and spread documents across the coffee table. New identities for all of us. A house in Costa Rica that can't be traced back to any of our names. And a very nice nest egg from the children's trust funds to keep us comfortable. The police know about Marie. They know about the fake lawyer. They'll figure it out. They'll figure out that Patricia and Marie were working together, yes. They might even discover that poor Patricia had some gambling debts that made her desperate enough to attempt kidnapping. My mother's voice was eerily calm. They'll find Patricia's body in the river in a few days. Tragic suicide, overcome with guilt about what she'd done. Patricia gasped. Dorothy, you can't. I can't trust you not to talk. You've already proven you can't follow simple instructions. I watched in horror as my mother pulled a small gun from her purse. Where had the confused, fragile woman I'd been caring for gone? This person in front of me was a stranger. The children and I are leaving tonight, she continued. By the time anyone realizes we're missing, we'll be on a plane to Central America with our new passports. You can't just take them. They're my children. They're my grandchildren, and they're my ticket to the life I should have had all along. She looked at Emma and Jake with what might have been affection, but felt more like ownership. Don't worry, darlings. Grandma is going to take you on a wonderful adventure. Emma buried her face in my shoulder. I want to stay with Mommy. You'll understand when you're older, my mother said gently. Sometimes grown-ups have to make hard choices to protect the people they love. This isn't protection. This is kidnapping. This is justice. Her voice hardened again. Your father promised me we'd travel the world together when he retired. Instead, he died and left me dependent on my daughter's charity. Well, I'm done being dependent. I thought about all the times I'd worried about her, all the phone calls checking if she was okay, all the doctor's appointments I'd driven her to. Had any of it been real? The confusion? The memory problems? All an act. A very good one, I thought. It made you feel guilty enough to handle my finances, which gave me access to information about your accounts, David's life insurance, the children's trust funds. You've been planning this since Dad died? I've been planning this since the day I realized your father was never going to make me a true partner in his business. But his death gave me the perfect opportunity. The grieving widow, so overwhelmed she could barely function. Everyone felt sorry for me. No one suspected I was documenting every financial detail of your family's life. Patricia was still standing frozen, staring at the gun in my mother's hand. Dorothy, please, we can still work together. I won't tell anyone anything. Patricia, you've already told too many people too much. Marie knows your real name. The fake lawyer has seen your face. You're a liability. What about David? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Did you? That was Marie's idea, not mine. I told her to be patient, to wait until we had everything in place. But she panicked when David started asking questions about the insurance beneficiaries. She acted without my permission. You let her kill my husband. I tried to stop her, but once it was done, I had to adapt. David's death actually made the custody plan easier to execute. A grieving widow is much more vulnerable than a happily married woman. I felt sick. My husband had died because my mother's plan had spiraled out of control, and she was talking about it like a minor inconvenience. The police will find the truth, I said. The police will find exactly what I want them to find. Patricia's gambling debts, her partnership with Marie, her desperate attempt to kidnap children for ransom money, and sadly, her suicide when the guilt became too much to bear. She turned to Patricia. I'm sorry it has to end this way. You really were very helpful. Patricia backed toward the door. Dorothy, please. The sound of the gunshot made my children scream. Patricia crumpled to the floor, and I pulled Emma and Jake behind the couch, trying to shield them from the sight. Now then, my mother said calmly, as if she hadn't just murdered someone in front of her grandchildren. We need to pack quickly. Our flight leaves in 6 hours. I held my children tight, my mind racing. This couldn't be happening. My mother, the woman who'd taught me to ride a bike, who'd made me soup when I was sick, who'd cried at my wedding, had just killed someone in cold blood. You're not taking them, I said again. Lisa, don't make this harder than it needs to be. I don't want to hurt you, but I will if you force me to. They're traumatized. They just watched you kill someone. They'll forget. Children are resilient, and they'll have a wonderful life in Costa Rica. Beach house, private tutors, everything money can buy. With stolen money. With money that should have been mine from the beginning? Your father built that company with my ideas, my contacts, my unpaid labor. I deserved to be listed as a partner, not just the owner's wife. I could see the years of resentment in her eyes, the bitterness that had been growing like a cancer. But understanding her motives didn't make any of this forgivable. Let me call Detective Rodriguez, I said. Turn yourself in. Say Patricia forced you into this. Say you were scared. I'm done being scared. I'm done being powerless. I'm done being dependent on other people's charity. She checked her watch. We need to go. The car is packed, the tickets are ready, and our new life is waiting. I won't go. Then you'll die here with Patricia, and I'll tell the children that Mommy had an accident, just like Daddy did. The casual way she threatened my life made my blood freeze. This wasn't just greed or desperation. This was something much darker. You'd really kill me? Your own daughter? I'd really do whatever it takes to secure my grandchildren's future. And mine. She gestured toward the door with the gun. Let's go. Don't make me count to 3. I stood up slowly, still holding my children. My mind was spinning, trying to find a way out of this nightmare. How had I missed the signs? How had I lived with this woman for months without seeing what she really was? Then I remembered something Detective Rodriguez had said about the investigation. Something about phone records and financial traces. They'll track the money, I said. The police already know about the insurance fraud. When they trace the offshore accounts, they'll find accounts opened by Patricia Williams, using forged documents and stolen identification. Poor Patricia was much more clever than anyone gave her credit for. My mother had thought of everything. She'd been planning this for years, setting up Patricia as the fall guy, using Marie as the muscle, staying completely in the shadows until it was time to disappear. But there was still one thing that didn't make sense. The threatening notes. The car following us. Why the psychological games? I needed you scared and isolated. Scared people make bad decisions, and isolated people have fewer witnesses. She checked her watch again. We're running out of time. The children need to be at the airport in 4 hours for their new passport photos. New passport photos? Did you think I was going to try to smuggle them out of the country without proper documentation? I've been working on this for 2 years, Lisa. Every detail has been planned. That's when I realized the most terrifying truth of all. This wasn't a desperate plan thrown together in the wake of David's death. This was a carefully orchestrated operation that had been in motion long before my husband died. My mother had been preparing to steal my children for 2 years, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. And I had handed her that moment by trusting her completely. But as she gestured for us to move toward the door, I caught sight of something that made my heart leap with hope. Through the window, I could see a police car pulling into the driveway. My mother saw it too. Her face went white, and for the first time since she'd revealed her true nature, she looked genuinely afraid. "That's impossible," she whispered. "No one knows we're here." That's when I realized there was still one more secret I hadn't uncovered yet. Someone else had been watching. Someone else had been planning. And they were about to walk through that door. The police car doors slammed shut, and I heard Detective Rodriguez's voice calling out. But before I could respond, my mother grabbed Emma, pressing the gun to my daughter's head. "Not a sound," she whispered, "or your daughter pays the price." Emma whimpered, and Jake pressed closer to my side. Patricia's body lay motionless on the floor, a growing pool of blood beneath her. The whole scene felt like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. Detective Rodriguez knocked on the front door. "Mrs. Travis, we need to speak with you." My mother's eyes darted between the door and the windows. For someone who claimed to have planned everything perfectly, she looked genuinely panicked. That's when it hit me. She hadn't expected the police to arrive, which meant someone else had called them. "Lisa?" Detective Rodriguez called again. "We know you're in there. Your neighbor saw lights on." My mother pressed the gun harder against Emma's temple. My daughter's eyes were wide with terror, tears streaming down her face. I had to do something, but any wrong move could cost Emma her life. "Answer the door," my mother hissed. "Get rid of them. Tell them everything's fine." I walked slowly toward the front door, my mind racing. How could I signal for help without endangering my children? As I reached for the doorknob, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. The deadbolt was already unlocked. I hadn't unlocked it. My mother had been inside when I arrived, so either she had a key or someone had let her in. But the only other person with a key was... "Mrs. Travis?" Detective Rodriguez's voice was getting more insistent. "We need to speak with you about Marie Reed." I opened the door just a crack, keeping my body positioned to block his view of the room. "Detective, this isn't a good time. I'm afraid it can't wait. We've discovered some new information about Marie's case. Information that involves your family directly." Behind me, I heard my mother's sharp intake of breath. Whatever the police had found, she wasn't expecting it. "Marie Reed wasn't working alone," Detective Rodriguez continued. "We found communications between her and someone else. Someone who's been planning this for a very long time." "I don't understand," I said, though pieces were starting to click into place in my mind. The insurance fraud, the threats, the psychological manipulation, It was all coordinated by someone with intimate knowledge of your family's finances and routines. Someone who had access to your home, your personal information, your children's schedules. My mother's face had gone ashen. She was still holding Emma, but I could see her hands shaking now. "We tracked the money trail," Detective Rodriguez said. "The offshore accounts weren't opened by Patricia Williams. They were opened by someone using Patricia's stolen identity, but the real mastermind was much closer to home." That's when I heard footsteps behind me. I turned to see someone walking down the hallway from the kitchen. Someone I hadn't expected to see here. Lynn Schroeder. My children's nanny. The woman I'd trusted with my kids for the past 3 years. The woman who'd been in my home almost every day since David died. The woman who'd had access to everything. Our schedules, our finances, our most private moments. "Hello, Lisa," Lynn said calmly. "I think it's time you knew the truth." My mother was staring at Lynn with a mixture of shock and fury. "What are you doing here? You were supposed to be at the airport." "Change of plans," Lynn replied. She looked at Detective Rodriguez through the crack in the door. "You can come in now. It's safe." My mind was reeling. Lynn and my mother were working together? But that didn't make sense. Lynn had been the one comforting my children, helping them adjust to life without their father. She'd been the stable presence in our chaotic world. Detective Rodriguez pushed the door open, his hand on his weapon. 2 other officers followed him in. When they saw Patricia's body and my mother holding Emma at gunpoint, they immediately drew their guns. "Put the weapon down," Detective Rodriguez commanded. "I don't think so," my mother replied, but her voice was shaking now. That's when Lynn spoke again, and her words changed everything I thought I knew. "Dorothy, it's over. I've already told them everything." My mother's face crumpled. "You betrayed me, after everything I did for you." "Everything you did for me?" Lynn laughed bitterly. "You mean like stealing my life insurance money when my husband died? Like forging documents to make yourself the beneficiary of policies I'd been paying into for 15 years? I felt like the ground was shifting beneath my feet. Lynn's husband had died? When? How had I not known this? "That money was rightfully mine," my mother snapped. "Richard promised me that money before he died." "Richard was my husband," Lynn said quietly, "and you were his business partner's wife. You had no claim to his life insurance." The pieces were starting to come together, but the picture they formed was more twisted than I could have imagined. Lynn wasn't just my children's nanny. She was somehow connected to my mother's business dealings, to the insurance fraud, to everything that had been happening. "Mrs. Travis," Detective Rodriguez said carefully, "we need you to step away from your mother. Can you do that?" I looked at Emma, still trapped in my mother's arms with a gun to her head. Then I looked at Lynn, who was watching the scene with an expression I'd never seen before. Not the gentle, caring woman who'd read bedtime stories to my children. This was someone harder, more calculating. "Lynn," I said slowly, "how long have you been planning this?" She smiled, but it wasn't the warm smile I remembered. "Planning what, Lisa? Bringing your mother to justice? Or planning something else entirely?" That's when I realized the most terrifying truth of all. I'd been looking at this all wrong. My mother wasn't the mastermind. She was just another pawn in someone else's game. Lynn had been in my house for 3 years. She'd watched my marriage, my finances, my family dynamics. She'd been there when David died, comforting me in my grief, helping me make decisions when I was too broken to think clearly, including the decision to give her power of attorney to handle certain legal matters while I was mourning. "The living will," I whispered. Lynn nodded. You signed it 6 months ago. You were so grateful for my help with the legal paperwork after David's death. You trusted me completely. My hands went cold. What did I actually sign? Custody papers. In the event of your death or incapacitation, guardianship of Emma and Jake would transfer to me. And given your recent mental health struggles, your threats of suicide, your erratic behavior. I never threatened suicide. I never behaved erratically. According to the medical records I've been carefully documenting, you have. According to the witnesses I've been cultivating, you have. According to the audio recordings I've been making of your private conversations, you have. The room was spinning. Every conversation, every vulnerable moment, every time I'd broken down in front of her. She'd been documenting it all, building a case against me. You've been recording me? For your own protection, of course. A grieving widow, struggling with depression, making concerning statements about not wanting to go on without her husband. The courts will be very sympathetic to my petition for emergency custody. Detective Rodriguez was listening to this exchange with growing alarm. Ma'am, are you saying you've been manipulating Mrs. Travis to gain custody of her children? I'm saying I've been protecting these children from an unstable mother, and from a grandmother who's clearly dangerous. Lynn gestured toward my mother, who was still holding Emma. But something in Lynn's tone made me realize there was still more to this story. She was too calm, too prepared. This wasn't just about custody or money or revenge for her husband's insurance policies. Why? I asked. Why do you want my children? Lynn's expression softened for just a moment, and I saw something that looked almost like genuine pain. Because they're all I have left of him. Left of who? Of David. The words hit me like a physical blow. What are you talking about? David was going to leave you, Lisa. He'd been planning it for months. We were going to start a new life together, him and me and the children. He was going to file for custody, and I was going to help him prove you were an unfit mother. I stared at her, unable to process what she was saying. That's not true. David loved me. He would never... David loved the idea of you, but he was tired of the reality. The constant arguments about money, your paranoia about his business dealings, your refusal to let him make important decisions about the children's future. You're lying. Am I? Think about it, Lisa. Why do you think he was working such long hours in the months before he died? Why do you think he was so secretive about his phone calls? Why do you think he insisted on hiring me as the nanny, even though you had reservations? Each question was like a knife in my chest, because she was right about all of it. David had been distant in the months before his death. He had been working late, taking mysterious phone calls, making decisions without consulting me. And he had insisted on hiring Lynn, despite my feeling that something was off about her. The car accident, I whispered. Wasn't an accident, Lynn confirmed. David was on his way to meet with his lawyer. He was going to file for divorce and custody the next morning, but someone tampered with his brakes. She looked directly at my mother. Someone who couldn't afford to lose control of the family finances? Someone who needed David alive and married to you to maintain access to the business accounts. My mother's face had gone completely white. You can't prove any of that. Actually, I can. I have the security footage from the parking garage where David's car was parked the night before the accident. I have the mechanic's report showing the brake lines were deliberately severed. And I have David's phone record showing he called you, Dorothy, 30 minutes before he died. The gun in my mother's hand was shaking violently now. Emma was sobbing, and Jake was clinging to my legs so tightly I could barely stand. But I was focused on Lynn, trying to understand the full scope of what she was telling me. So, you've been planning this since before David died? I've been planning this since the day I realized your mother killed the man I loved to protect her stolen money. I've spent 3 years getting close to your family, earning your trust, documenting everything I needed to prove what really happened. And the custody papers? The recordings? Insurance. If I couldn't get justice through the courts, I'd get it by taking the children David wanted me to help raise. They'd be safe with me, away from both of you. Detective Rodriguez stepped forward. Ma'am, I need you to explain exactly what evidence you have regarding David Travis's death. But before Lynn could answer, my mother made a desperate move. She swung the gun away from Emma and pointed it directly at Lynn. You destroyed everything, she screamed. Everything I worked for, everything I built. The gunshot was deafening in the small room. But it wasn't my mother who fired. It was Lynn. My mother crumpled to the floor next to Patricia, and Emma ran to me, sobbing. I pulled both my children close, trying to shield them from the carnage around us. Lynn was holding a small pistol I'd never seen before. She looked at Detective Rodriguez with the same calm expression she'd worn while explaining her plans. Self-defense, she said simply. She was about to shoot me. But as I held my traumatized children and looked at the 2 bodies on my living room floor, I realized that Lynn's story was just another layer of lies. Because someone who'd been planning this for 3 years, someone who'd been manipulating and recording and documenting everything, someone who'd managed to orchestrate such an elaborate scheme, that person didn't need to rely on self-defense. That person had been planning to kill my mother all along. I finally understood part of the truth. But as I looked into Lynn's eyes, I knew there was still something she wasn't telling me. Something about David's death. About her real relationship with my family. About why she'd really spent 3 years infiltrating our lives. The custody papers might have been her backup plan, but they weren't her endgame. I stared at Lynn, my mind reeling from everything she'd just revealed. David had been planning to leave me. My mother had killed him. Lynn had been seeking revenge for 3 years, but something wasn't adding up. Wait, I said, still holding my children close. If you've been planning this since David died, if you have all this evidence about my mother killing him, why didn't you just go to the police 3 years ago? Lynn's calm expression flickered for just a moment. I told you, I needed time to gather everything. No. I stood up, keeping Emma and Jake behind me. You had security footage. You had phone records. You said you knew my mother killed David the day after it happened. So why wait 3 years? Detective Rodriguez stepped closer, his hand moving toward his weapon as he studied Lynn's face. That's a good question, ma'am. Lynn's grip tightened on the gun she was still holding. I needed to be thorough. I needed to make sure. You needed to get close to my children. The realization hit me like a physical blow. This was never about justice for David. This was about something else entirely. I thought about the past 3 years. How Lynn had inserted herself into our lives so completely. How she'd gained my trust. Become indispensable to our family routine. How she'd documented everything, recorded everything. Positioned herself as the perfect alternative guardian for my children. You never loved David, did you? Lynn's mask was slipping now. I could see something cold and calculating in her eyes that I'd missed for 3 years. Of course I loved him. No, you didn't. I was putting it together piece by piece. You wanted something from him, and when you couldn't get it, you found another way. Lisa, you don't understand. Then explain it to me. I took a step forward, surprising myself with my own courage. Explain why someone who supposedly loved my husband would spend 3 years manipulating his widow and traumatizing his children instead of just seeking justice. Lynn looked from me to Detective Rodriguez, to the two bodies on my floor. I could see her calculating, trying to decide how much truth to reveal. David wasn't just planning to leave you, she finally said. He was planning to leave the country. What? The business wasn't just struggling, Lisa. It was hemorrhaging money. David had been embezzling from client accounts for over a year, trying to keep it afloat. When he realized he couldn't cover it up anymore, he decided to disappear. I felt like the ground was shifting beneath my feet. That's impossible. David would never what? Steal? Abandon his family? Leave his children? Lynn's voice was getting harder, more bitter. He was going to take every penny left in your accounts and start over somewhere with no extradition treaty. Detective Rodriguez pulled out his notepad. Do you have evidence of this alleged embezzlement? I have everything. Lynn reached into her jacket pocket, and both the detective and I tensed, but she only pulled out a small flash drive. Bank records, forged signatures, falsified investment reports. David was good at what he did, but he wasn't perfect. So you killed him? The words came out of my mouth before I could stop them. Lynn smiled, and it was the coldest expression I'd ever seen. I didn't have to kill him. Your mother did that for me. What do you mean? I mean, I told your mother what David was planning. I showed her the evidence of his embezzlement, his plans to disappear. I told her exactly when he was meeting with his lawyer, exactly what route he'd take to get there. The room went completely silent, except for Emma's quiet sniffling. You manipulated my mother into killing my husband. I gave your mother information. What she chose to do with it was her decision. Lynn shrugged, as if we were discussing the weather. Though I did suggest that a car accident would be much cleaner than a messy divorce and criminal investigation. I couldn't breathe. Everything I thought I knew about David's death, about my mother's motives, about Lynn's presence in our lives, it was all a lie built on top of another lie. But why? I whispered. Why go through all this trouble? Why not just let David leave? Why not let the embezzlement come to light? Because David stole from me too. Lynn's voice was flat, matter of fact. I wasn't his lover, Lisa. I was his business partner. Silent partner, you might say. I'd invested everything I had in his firm. My divorce settlement, my inheritance, my children's college funds, everything. Your children? My daughter Emma and my son Jake. The world tilted sideways. I grabbed the back of a chair to keep from falling. That's right, Lynn continued, seeing the shock on my face. Your children aren't really yours, Lisa. They're mine. David and I had an arrangement. He needed a family to appear stable for his business. I needed financial security for my children. We agreed that after a few years, when his firm was established, we'd stage his death, and I'd take the children back. That's impossible. But even as I said it, I was remembering things. How David had handled all the adoption paperwork privately. How he'd insisted we use his lawyer, his contacts. How he'd been so secretive about Emma and Jake's background, claiming their birth parents had requested complete confidentiality. Check their birth certificates, Lynn said. The real ones, not the ones David had forged for the adoption. Emma Lynn Schroeder. Jake David Schroeder. Born to Lynn Marie Schroeder and father unknown. I looked down at the children clinging to my legs. Emma's eyes, which I'd always thought looked so much like David's. Jake's stubborn streak, which I'd attributed to his mysterious genetic heritage. They had Lynn's eyes. They had Lynn's mannerisms. They weren't my children at all. The custody papers you made me sign, I said slowly. They weren't transferring custody to you. They were returning custody to you. Finally. Lynn looked almost proud. I was beginning to think you'd never figure it out. Detective Rodriguez stepped forward. Ma'am, I need you to put the weapon down and step away from the children. But Lynn shook her head. These are my children, officer. I have every legal right to take them home. Mommy Lisa? Emma looked up at me with tear-filled eyes. I don't understand what's happening. I knelt down and pulled both children close, my heart breaking into a million pieces. They might not be biologically mine, but they were my children in every way that mattered. I'd raised them for 3 years. I'd loved them, protected them, been the only mother they'd ever known. It's going to be okay, I whispered, though I didn't know how it possibly could be. No, Jake said firmly, wrapping his arms around my neck. I want to stay with you. Me too, Emma added. You're our real mommy. Lynn's face darkened. They'll understand when they're older, when they realize what you and David put them through. What we put them through? I stood up, fury replacing my shock. You orchestrated my husband's murder. You've spent 3 years lying to children who think of you as their nanny. You held my mother at gunpoint. You've traumatized them more than... I did what I had to do to get my children back. Lynn's composure finally cracked. David was supposed to fake his death and bring them to me. Instead, your psychotic mother actually killed him and left me with nothing. No money, no children, no way to prove they were mine without exposing the whole scheme. So you decided to frame me as an unfit mother. I decided to document the truth, that you're raising stolen children with stolen money in a house built on lies. Detective Rodriguez had his weapon drawn now. Ma'am, I need you to put the gun down immediately. But Lynn wasn't listening. She was looking at Emma and Jake with an expression I'd never seen before. Desperate, hungry, almost wild. They're coming home with me tonight, she said. I've waited 3 years. I won't wait any longer. That's when I realized the custody papers might have been legal. If David had lied about the adoption, if he'd never actually terminated Lynn's parental rights, if the whole thing had been an elaborate fraud, Lynn might actually have the legal right to take my children, and there was nothing I could do to stop her. I finally understood the full scope of her plan. But looking into her eyes, I realized there was still something more. Something about why she'd really agreed to David's scheme in the first place. Something about what had driven her to such desperate measures. The custody battle was just beginning, but I had the feeling the real war was about to start. Actually, Detective Rodriguez said, lowering his weapon slightly, I think there's something you both need to know. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a manila folder. We've been investigating this case for longer than you realize, Mrs. Travis. Your mother, Dorothy, contacted us weeks ago. My blood ran cold. My mother? She suspected something was wrong when she saw Lynn Schroeder's name on your emergency contact list. You see, Lynn Schroeder died in a car accident 2 years ago. The room went silent, except for the sound of my heart pounding in my ears. Lynn's face went completely white. That's impossible. Is it? Detective Rodriguez opened the folder. Because according to our records, Lynn Marie Schroeder was killed in Portland, Oregon, 26 months ago. Single car accident, no survivors. She left behind no children. I stared at the woman I'd known for 3 years. The woman who'd cared for my children, who'd been in my home, who'd just claimed to be their biological mother. Then who are you? I whispered. For the first time since I'd known her, the woman I'd called Lynn looked genuinely afraid. You don't understand. Try me. Detective Rodriguez stepped closer. We ran her fingerprints when she was brought in for questioning yesterday. Her real name is Carol Brennan. She's a former social worker who lost her license 5 years ago for falsifying adoption records. The pieces clicked into place with horrifying clarity. You knew David was planning to fake his death. You knew about the embezzlement, but you weren't his business partner. Carol's shoulders sagged. I was his facilitator. David needed children for his cover story, and I knew how to make that happen. Quietly, off the books. You helped him steal my children. They weren't stolen. Carol's voice cracked. Emma and Jake were in foster care. Their birth parents had already signed away their rights. I just expedited the process, made sure David got them instead of going through the usual channels. Why? Because he paid me. The words came out like a confession. $50,000 to arrange a private adoption. Another $50,000 to keep my mouth shut about the irregularities. I felt sick. And when David was actually murdered instead of faking his death? I panicked. The money was gone. I'd already spent it trying to stay afloat after losing my license. But I knew those children, Lisa. I'd placed them with David myself. I thought if I could prove you were an unfit mother, if I could get custody of them, you could sell them again. Carol flinched like I'd slapped her. It wasn't like that. Then what was it like? I was shaking with rage now. You spent 3 years in my home, caring for children you'd helped traffic, planning to steal them away from the only family they'd ever known. What would you call it? I call it survival. Carol's voice was barely a whisper. I lost everything when my license was revoked. My career, my reputation, my savings. Those children were my only way back. Detective Rodriguez stepped between us. Carol Brennan, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, child trafficking, and conspiracy to commit murder. Murder? Carol looked genuinely shocked. I never planned for David to actually die. When Dorothy shot him, it ruined everything. But you knew she was planning it? I suspected she might do something drastic when she found out about the embezzlement. That's why I suggested David disappear before she could act. But he was too greedy, too confident. He thought he could handle Dorothy. I knelt down beside Emma and Jake, who were clinging to each other in confusion and terror. It's okay, babies. This lady isn't going to hurt you anymore. But she said we're not really yours, Emma whispered. My heart broke all over again. You are mine. In every way that matters. You are my children, and no one is ever going to take you away from me. Carol was being handcuffed, but she turned back to me. Those custody papers you signed are still legal, Lisa. Even if I'm not who I said I was, even if I'm going to prison, the court will still need to determine what's best for the children. What do you mean? Detective Rodriguez looked uncomfortable. She's right. If the original adoption was fraudulent, if David never had legal authority to place these children with you, the state will need to investigate. The children might need to be placed in temporary custody while everything gets sorted out. No. The word came out fierce and final. These are my children. I've raised them for 3 years. I'm the only mother they've ever known. Mama Lisa. Jake tugged on my sleeve. Are they going to take us away? I looked into his scared little face, then at Emma's tear-streaked cheeks, and felt something steal inside me. No, baby. Nobody is taking you anywhere. But even as I said it, I could see the doubt in Detective Rodriguez's eyes. The legal system didn't care about love. It cared about paperwork, about proper procedures, about technicalities. And according to the technicalities, I might not have any legal right to these children at all. Carol was being led away in handcuffs, but she called back over her shoulder. Check their birth certificates, Lisa. The real ones are in David's safe deposit box. Bank of America on 5th Street, Box 247. Why are you telling me this? Because they deserve to know the truth about where they came from. Even if you hate me, even if I'm going to prison, those children deserve to know their real story. After the police left with Carol, I sat on my couch with Emma and Jake pressed against my sides. The house felt enormous and empty, like the walls themselves were holding secrets. Mama Lisa? Emma's voice was small. What's going to happen to us? I smoothed her hair back from her face. I don't know, sweetheart, but I promise you this, I will fight for you. With everything I have, I will fight to keep our family together. What if the judge says we have to go live with strangers? The question I'd been dreading. The question I didn't have an answer for. Then we'll deal with it together. But I believe the judge will see that you belong here, with me. This is your home. I'm your mother. And love matters more than any piece of paper. But as I held my children close, I couldn't shake the feeling that love might not be enough. Not against the legal system. Not against the truth about how they'd come to be mine in the first place. I thought about David's safe deposit box. About birth certificates that might hold answers I wasn't sure I wanted to know. About the real parents who'd given up Emma and Jake, and whether they might want them back. The phone rang, startling all three of us. Mrs. Travis? The voice was professional, official. This is Margaret Chen from Child Protective Services. I understand there's been some question about the legal status of Emma and Jake's placement in your home. I'll need to schedule a home visit to assess the situation. My hands were shaking as I held the phone. When? Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m., and Mrs. Travis? Until this matter is resolved, the children will need to remain in your care, but you cannot leave the state with them. Do you understand? I understood. I was a flight risk. They thought I might run with children who might not legally be mine. After I hung up, I looked at Emma and Jake. They were watching me with those wide, trusting eyes, waiting for me to fix everything the way I always had before. But this time, I wasn't sure I could. This time, the system itself might be against us. And tomorrow, a stranger would walk into our home and decide whether our family deserved to exist. The custody battle was about to begin. But looking at the fear in my children's eyes, I realized the real fight wasn't just about legal rights anymore. It was about proving that love could triumph over lies, that family was more than biology, and that sometimes the system needed to be challenged by the very people it was supposed to protect. Tomorrow would change everything. But tonight, I held my children close and tried to memorize the feeling of them in my arms. Just in case it was the last time I'd ever get the chance. The next morning arrived too quickly. Margaret Chen from Child Protective Services stood in my living room at exactly 9 a.m., clipboard in hand, studying my home like she was cataloging evidence. Emma and Jake sat on the couch, unusually quiet. They could sense the tension, the way children always can when their world might be about to change forever. Mrs. Travis, I need to ask some difficult questions about how these children came into your care. I took a deep breath. I understand. But first, there's something you need to know about the woman who was arrested yesterday. About what she told me. Ms. Chen looked up from her notes. Go ahead. She mentioned a safe deposit box, Bank of America on 5th Street, Box 247. She said the children's real birth certificates are there. And you haven't accessed this box? I don't have the key. David did. But I think those documents might hold answers about where Emma and Jake really came from. Ms. Chen made notes. We'll need to obtain a court order to access that box. In the meantime, I need to assess the current living situation. She walked through my house, asking questions about routines, school records, medical care. Emma and Jake followed us like shadows, their small hands reaching for mine whenever Ms. Chen wasn't looking. The children seem well cared for, she admitted. But Mrs. Travis, if the original adoption was fraudulent, if you never had legal authority to care for these children, the state has an obligation to investigate their true origins. What does that mean, exactly? It means we might need to place them in temporary foster care while we sort this out. No. The word came out sharper than I intended. These children have been through enough trauma. They don't need to be ripped away from the only stable home they've known. I understand your attachment, Mrs. Travis. But the law is clear. After she left, I sat with Emma and Jake, trying to explain what might happen without scaring them more than they already were. Mama Lisa? Emma's voice was small. That lady said we might have to go live with strangers. I won't let that happen, baby. But what if you can't stop it? The question broke my heart because I didn't have a good answer. The system didn't care about love. It cared about paperwork and procedures and technicalities. That afternoon, my phone rang. Detective Rodriguez. Lisa, we got the court order for David's safe deposit box. You might want to be here when we open it. An hour later, I stood in the vault of Bank of America, watching as Detective Rodriguez lifted documents from Box 247. Birth certificates, adoption papers, medical records. But as he spread them out on the table, I felt the blood drain from my face. This can't be right, I whispered. The birth certificates showed Emma and Jake's real names, Emma Marie Reed and Jacob Michael Reed. Born to Marie Reed and an unknown father. Marie, my sister Marie. Detective, I said, my voice barely steady. These children, they're my sister's biological children? He looked up sharply. Your sister, who convinced you to sign the custody papers? She didn't just trick me into signing away custody of children I thought were adopted. She tricked me into signing away custody of her own biological children. Emma and Jake are my nephew and niece. The pieces were falling into place now, creating a picture so twisted I could barely comprehend it. Marie had given birth to these children, then somehow arranged for David to place them with me through fraudulent adoption papers. She'd let me raise them, love them, bond with them for 3 years, and then she'd come back to take them away. But why? Detective Rodriguez asked. Why would she give them up only to try to get them back? I don't know, but I'm going to find out. That evening, I drove to the county jail where Marie was being held on fraud charges. She looked older, thinner, when they brought her to the visiting room. But her eyes still held that calculating look I'd learned to fear. Hello, Lisa. They're your children. I didn't waste time with pleasantries. Emma and Jake, they're your biological children. For a moment, her mask slipped. I saw surprise, then something that might have been regret. How did you find out? David's safe deposit box, birth certificates with your name on them. Marie Reed, mother to Emma Marie Reed and Jacob Michael Reed. She sat back in her chair, studying me. You always were too smart for your own good. Why? Why give them up only to try to take them back? Why put them through this? Why put me through this? Marie was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was different. Softer, almost vulnerable. Because I wasn't ready to be a mother when they were born. I was using drugs, Lisa. Heavy drugs. I could barely take care of myself, let alone 2 babies. So you gave them to me through David's fake adoption scheme? I knew you'd love them. I knew you'd give them everything I couldn't. A stable home, security, someone who would put them first. Then why try to take them back? Because I got clean. I got my life together, and I wanted my children back. I stared at her across the table. So you decided to destroy the only family they've ever known? To traumatize them? To lie to me for months? I thought if I could prove you were an unfit guardian, the courts would give them back to me. Their real mother. Their real mother? I stood up, anger flooding through me. I'm the one who held them when they had nightmares. I'm the one who taught them to read, to ride bikes, to say their prayers. I'm the one who loves them unconditionally. You're not their blood, Lisa. And you're not their mother. Biology doesn't make you a mother. Love does. Sacrifice does. Being there every single day does. Marie's face hardened again. The courts will see it differently. Once they know I'm clean, once they know I'm their biological mother, they'll give my children back to me. Your children? You signed away your parental rights when you let David place them with me? Through fraudulent papers, which means those rights were never legally terminated. The visiting guard signaled that our time was up, but Marie leaned forward. I'm getting out of here, Lisa. The charges won't stick. And when I do, I'm going to court to get Emma and Jake back. They belong with their real family. I am their real family. We'll see what the judge says about that. As I walked out of that jail, my hands were shaking with rage and fear. Marie wasn't just fighting for custody. She was fighting to erase 3 years of love, 3 years of family, 3 years of the only life Emma and Jake had ever known. But I had evidence now. I had the truth about David's scheme, about the fraudulent adoption, about Marie's drug history. I had documentation of 3 years of being Emma and Jake's primary caregiver. The question was, would it be enough? That night, I called my lawyer, Sarah Martinez. Sarah, I need you to file an emergency petition for permanent custody. I have new evidence about the children's biological mother and why she gave them up. Lisa, you need to prepare yourself. If she's their biological mother and her parental rights were never properly terminated, she has a strong legal claim. But she abandoned them. She was using drugs. She gave them up because she couldn't care for them. That was 3 years ago. If she can prove she's rehabilitated, if she can show stable housing and employment, the courts tend to favor reunification with biological parents. The words hit me like a physical blow. So you're saying I might lose them? I'm saying we need to build the strongest case possible. Document everything. Every doctor's appointment, every school conference, every moment of care you've provided. We need to prove that keeping them with you is in their best interest. After I hung up, I went to check on Emma and Jake. They were sleeping peacefully, Emma's arm thrown over Jake's shoulders protectively. They looked so small, so innocent, so unaware that their entire world was about to be turned upside down again. I thought about Marie's words, about biological mothers and real families, about courts that might decide love wasn't enough. But as I watched my children sleep, I made a promise. I would fight for them with everything I had. I would use every legal resource, every piece of evidence, every moment of documented love to prove that family was more than blood. The custody battle was about to begin in earnest. Marie thought she could waltz back into their lives after 3 years and claim them like possessions. She was about to learn that this mother, the only mother Emma and Jake had ever truly known, wouldn't go down without a fight. But even as I made that vow, doubt crept in. The legal system favored biological parents, and Marie knew exactly which buttons to push, exactly how to manipulate the system to get what she wanted. Tomorrow, I would start building my case. Tomorrow, I would begin the fight of my life. But tonight, As I kissed my children goodnight, I couldn't shake the terrifying thought that it might not be enough. The custody hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks after my visit with Marie. 3 weeks to prepare for the fight of my life. Sarah Martinez worked around the clock, building our case. We documented everything. Every scraped knee I'd bandaged, every parent-teacher conference I'd attended, every bedtime story I'd read. We gathered testimony from their teachers, their pediatrician, even neighbors who'd watched Emma and Jake grow up in my care. But Marie's lawyer was good too. They painted a picture of a reformed woman who'd overcome addiction, found stable employment, and deserved a chance to reunite with her biological children. They argued that the fraudulent adoption meant she'd never legally surrendered her parental rights. The night before the hearing, I sat Emma and Jake down. They were only 3 and 4, but they needed to know something was happening. "Mommy has to go to court tomorrow," I told them gently. "Some grown-ups are trying to decide what's best for our family." Emma looked up at me with those big brown eyes. "Are you going away?" "I'm going to fight to stay with you both. No matter what happens, I love you more than anything in this world." Jake climbed into my lap. "We love you too, Mommy." That word, Mommy, spoken so naturally, so completely. They didn't know any other mother. I was the only mother they'd ever had. The hearing felt like it lasted forever. Marie took the stand, talking about her recovery, her new job as a restaurant manager, her small apartment she'd prepared for the children. She spoke about wanting to make amends, about deserving a second chance. When I testified, I spoke about love, about the 1,000 small moments that make a family, about Emma's first word, Jake's first steps, the way they both crawled into my bed during thunderstorms, about homework help and soccer practices and birthday parties. "Your Honor," I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart, "I don't dispute that Marie is their biological mother, but I am the only mother these children have ever known. For 3 years, I've been their constant, their security, their home." The judge asked tough questions about the fraudulent adoption, about Marie's rights as a biological parent, about what was truly in the children's best interest. Child Protective Services recommended that Emma and Jake remain with me, citing their strong attachment and my proven ability to provide stable care. The court-appointed child advocate agreed. But the law was complicated. Marie's parental rights had never been properly terminated. The fraudulent adoption created legal gray areas that could work in her favor. After 2 days of testimony, the judge called for a recess to review everything. 2 weeks to wait for a decision that would determine our entire future. Those 2 weeks were torture. I tried to maintain normalcy for Emma and Jake, but inside, I was falling apart. Every phone call might be the court. Every day might be our last as a family. Sarah tried to prepare me for all possibilities. Joint custody, supervised visitation, gradual transition, complete custody reversal. "The judge seemed impressed with your testimony," she said. "But biological parent rights are strong in this state. We need to be prepared for anything." The call came on a Tuesday morning. The judge had reached a decision. We gathered in the courtroom, me, Sarah, Marie, and her lawyer, the CPS caseworker, the child advocate. My hands were shaking as I sat down. The judge looked at both of us before speaking. "This case presents a complex situation involving fraudulent adoption procedures, biological parent rights, and the best interests of 2 young children who have formed strong attachments to their current caregiver." My heart was pounding so hard I could barely hear. While Ms. Reed is indeed the biological mother of Emma and Jake, the court must consider their psychological and emotional well-being above all else. These children have lived with Ms. Travis for 3 years, the majority of their lives. She has provided stable, loving care and has demonstrated complete commitment to their welfare. The judge paused, looking directly at Marie. Ms. Reed, your recovery from addiction is commendable, and your desire to reunite with your children is understandable. However, the court must consider what is in the children's best interest, not what might fulfill an adult's desires. Another pause. I held my breath. The court finds that removing Emma and Jake from Ms. Travis's care would cause significant psychological trauma and disruption to children who have known no other primary caregiver. Therefore, the court awards full custody to Ms. Travis, with the option for Ms. Reed to pursue supervised visitation if she completes court-mandated counseling and maintains stable employment for 6 months. The words hit me like a wave. I had won. Emma and Jake were staying with me. Marie's face crumpled. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. But then I remembered everything she'd put us through. The lies, the manipulation, the attempt to destroy our family for her own desires. As we left the courthouse, Sarah squeezed my hand. It's over, Lisa. They're yours legally now. No one can take them away. But the victory felt bittersweet. Emma and Jake would grow up knowing their biological mother had tried to take them away from the only family they'd ever known. They'd have questions I wasn't sure how to answer. That evening, I picked up Emma and Jake from their babysitter, my neighbor Mrs. Chen, who'd testified about what a devoted mother she'd seen me be over the years. "Did you win, Mommy?" Emma asked as we drove home. "Yes, baby, we won. We get to stay together." "Forever and ever? Forever and ever?" The months that followed weren't easy. Marie never pursued the supervised visitation option. She disappeared from our lives as suddenly as she'd entered them, apparently deciding that if she couldn't have full custody, she didn't want anything at all. I started therapy to process everything that had happened. The betrayal by David, the months of lies from Marie and Lynn, the terror of potentially losing my children. I needed help working through the anger and fear that lingered even after our victory. Emma and Jake started therapy too, age-appropriate sessions to help them understand what had happened and process any confusion or anxiety about the court proceedings. Their therapist assured me they were remarkably resilient, but I wanted to make sure they had support for any questions that might arise as they grew older. 6 months after the custody hearing, I made a decision that surprised everyone, including myself. I decided to move. Not far, just across town to a new neighborhood, a fresh start. The house where we'd lived held too many memories of deception and fear. I wanted Emma and Jake to have a home filled only with love and truth. Our new house was smaller but brighter, with a big backyard where Emma and Jake could play safely. I painted Emma's room pink with white flowers, just like she'd always wanted. Jake chose superhero decorations for his room. "This is our forever house," Emma announced on moving day, running through the empty rooms. "Our forever house with our forever family," Jake agreed. As I watched them explore their new home, I realized something profound had changed in me. The woman who'd been so easily deceived by David, so trusting of strangers like Lynn, was gone. In her place was someone stronger, more cautious, but not cynical, protective, but not paranoid. I'd learned to trust my instincts, to ask questions when something felt wrong, to verify what people told me instead of accepting it blindly. Most importantly, I'd learned that love, real, committed, daily love, was more powerful than biology or legal documents or manipulation. The adoption process for Emma and Jake was finalized 8 months after the custody hearing. This time, everything was legal, transparent, and permanent. When the judge signed the final papers, I cried tears of relief and joy. Now no one can ever question that you're their real mother," Sarah said afterward. But I already knew I was their real mother. I'd known it the first night David brought them home, when baby Emma had stopped crying the moment I held her. I'd known it when Jake took his first steps toward me. I'd known it through every fever, every nightmare, every proud moment and difficult day. The legal papers just made official what had been true all along. Emma and Jake are older now, and sometimes they ask questions about their birth mommy and why she gave them to me. I tell them age-appropriate truths, that she wasn't able to take care of babies when they were born, but she knew I would love them and keep them safe. I don't tell them about Marie's attempts to take them away. That's a story for when they're much older, if they ever need to hear it at all. For now, they know they were chosen, they were wanted, and they were loved from the very first day they came home. The betrayals that brought us together, David's fraud, Marie's desperation, Lynn's deception, could have destroyed us. Instead, they made us stronger. They taught me that family isn't about blood or paperwork or legal definitions. Family is about showing up every day. It's about putting someone else's needs before your own without keeping score. It's about creating safety and security and unconditional love, even when the world tries to tear it apart. Emma and Jake taught me what it really means to be a mother. Not the woman who gives birth, but the woman who gives everything, her time, her energy, her heart, her whole life, to make sure her children know they're loved. On quiet evenings, when they're doing homework at the kitchen table and I'm making dinner, I sometimes think about how different our lives could have been. If Marie had succeeded, if the judge had ruled differently, if I hadn't fought as hard as I did. But then Emma looks up from her math problems and smiles at me, or Jake asks me to help him with a word he can't read, and I know we're exactly where we're supposed to be. The scars from those months of uncertainty and fear have faded, but never completely disappeared. I'm more protective now, more aware of who I trust and why. I verify information instead of accepting it blindly. I listen to my instincts when something feels wrong. But I'm also more confident in my role as Emma and Jake's mother. No one will ever again make me question whether I belong in their lives. No one will ever again convince me that biology matters more than love. We have family traditions now that are uniquely ours. Friday pizza nights and Saturday morning pancakes. Bedtime stories where I make up adventures starring them as the heroes. Holiday decorating sessions where they get to put the star on the tree together. These are the moments that matter, not court hearings or custody battles or legal documents. Just the ordinary, extraordinary moments of loving and being loved. Sometimes people ask me if I ever regret adopting Emma and Jake, given everything we went through. The question always surprises me. Regret loving them? Regret giving them a home? Regret fighting for our family? Never. The pain was worth it. The fear was worth it. The sleepless nights and legal bills and emotional trauma were all worth it for the privilege of being their mother. They saved me as much as I saved them. They taught me what unconditional love really means. They showed me strength I didn't know I had. As I tuck them into bed each night, I whisper the same words I've said since they were babies. You are loved. You are safe. You are home. And finally, after everything we've been through, I know that's absolutely true. What gave me the strength to fight for my family when everything seemed hopeless? The answer is simple. Them. Emma and Jake. The way they called me mommy without question. The way they trusted me completely. The way they loved me not because they had to, but because that's what families do. Love doesn't always look like what we expect. Sometimes it comes through deception and fraud and people who mean to use you. Sometimes it's tested by courts and lawyers and people who want to tear it apart. But real love, the kind that builds families and changes lives, always finds a way to survive. And in the end, that's the only truth that matters.